Let's do it. We want to get right to everything going on. These two guys are so generous. Michael was with us last night for the virtual meetup. Popped in for a few minutes, and it was really cool, and there were a lot of questions for him. And he's with us now. He's forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's the great Michael Shure, everybody.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice going solo. I have to say.
Yeah, you shook that Avila guy loose, and were able to just kind of spread your wings. This guy's the former senior news correspondent at ABC News, covered the White House for ABC, was their White House correspondent for years, and his takes are just so terrific. Jim Avila, everyone.
Well, I was glad to give Michael time to shine. I apologize for missing it. I was in an airport.
Well, we had a couple of I'm hearing an echo. Oh, you got it. Okay, good. We had a couple of screw ups along the way. But we in general had a really great. And if you were in the chat, you didn't know what you didn't know type thing. But anyway, it's great to have you guys here, especially on this extremely eventful week. I guess I want to start with the pure politics. So I'm going to, even though I feel the urgency of the Middle Eastern situation, and I want to talk to you about America's disposition toward that war, and over the time I was saying that may change. But what I'd like to start with is what's happening in the House of Representatives with the GOP. This has been a wild week during which both Jordan and Scalise stepped up as potential House speakers, and neither one could garner the votes to get it going. Scalise, I guess, was able to garner more support than was Jim Jordan. Speak to this situation, Jim, if you would, please.
Well, it's sort of, deja vu all over again. They can't really get it together. When you have only a 5-vote majority, or 4 votes, I think it's down to now, and you can't get 8 of your colleagues on the Republican side to agree to be moderate in any way, then it really is impossible. I think, if I were to guess, I think the Democrats are going to come over to rescue in some fashion. They're going to have to either find a way to find a moderate that they can all get behind, and with some guarantees from the Republican majority about what won't happen. I think they'll want to get rid of that one person can remove the speaker or call for a vote to remove the speaker. They'll get rid of that. They'll probably get some kind of agreement to keep the government open. And then maybe I'm living in fantasy land, but all this might be a good thing. This might be, where it leads somehow to the miracle of bipartisanship, strained bipartisanship, but perhaps they can find some middle ground here and isolate those on the far right and maybe some on the far left and play to the middle a bit. But that probably is a fantasy in my mind.
Michael?
Yeah, I think if they're going to if there's going to be bipartisanship, it's going to require the Republicans putting someone up there who certain Democrats, who Hakeem Jeffries can go to his caucus on the Democratic side and tell people to vote present. There's not going to be a Democrat who votes for the Republican Speaker of the House. But if you can get a certain number of them to vote present, it brings the threshold down that such a nominee would need. But there are very few people that would be palatable enough for some of these Democrats, including Jeffries, to risk. They like seeing the other side twist in the wind in this way. And I think what the optimistic thing here is in marginalizing the far extreme of a caucus, and that if you go through with this and too much of this happens and it starts hurting Republicans are going to start seeing that working to appease those people is not in their best interest. That's what could be possible. Jim Jordan's running again. Jim Jordan lost in a secret ballot to Steve Scalise, who couldn't get enough support so he had to drop out. which should indicate that Jim Jordan has even less support. So there are a number of people who won't vote for Jordan. He's certainly not a consensus builder. They're going to have to find somebody. I heard the name Mike Gallagher of Ohio today as a possibility. People who might be able to bridge the divide, not between right and left, but between moderate and ultra conservative in the Republican conference. It's going to be a tough thing to do. One of the, I keep saying Garrett Graves, who was one of the soldiers for Kevin McCarthy, might in fact be someone who's palatable to both sides. He's from the South, from Louisiana, and he is someone that Democrats find to be more reasonable as well. I haven't heard his name at all, that's except from me, but I do know that that's the kind of person that they would have to try and get around if they're going to get some Democrats to vote present.
What about this notion that they could modify the temporary speakership such that they could still move through, for example, a bill to support Israel or whatever it might be? There's a that's a kind of bipartisan issue right at the moment.
The temporary speaker, Patrick McHenry, the speaker pro tem, doesn't want that and doesn't path for that. I mean, again, like when these things happen, everybody talks about every possibility, from Donald Trump being speaker to changing the rules of the House. Changing the rules of the House, not so easy either. You're going to have to get support from lots of different people to do it. You can't really do it by fiat. So I think that in order to get that done, you would have to be appealing to a lot of the people that aren't complaining about the stalemate.
Yeah, I think the only way out, despite all these other wild ideas, is to find a moderate Republican that did not say that the election was a fraud or voted against Biden on January 6th. You have to find somebody who clears that hurdle. Then you have to find somebody who is moderate enough that it doesn't scare the Democrats away. And the Democrats have to make sure that they get a bunch of agreements that give them some power.
I don't see that. Yeah, I just don't see that happening. I mean, these were both, they nominated Jordan and Scalise. Scalise was the moderate in that crowd, and Jordan, both of whom voted not to certify the election.
Well, I don't think any Democrat was going to vote for a guy who said he was David Duke without the robes.
No, of course they wouldn't. But they're not. I don't think the Republicans, and they should be operating to curry favor with the Democrats here. I think they have to figure their own mess out, and I think that's what the Democrats think. But that may be the only way to a speaker, and if that's the case,
they're calling each other names now, Michael. I mean, the moderates in the Republican Party are calling the 8 right-wing nuts. They're calling them wing nuts. I mean, they're calling them out. I mean, there's some real damage. There's no sign of any kind of agreement amid the Republican Party, and maybe that'll change, but I don't see it. And I think
there are 221 of them, or 222 of them, something like that. There's going to be somebody in that group who's saying nothing right now, and one of those people, I suspect, would be the people. Maybe one of them is calling Jim now, but one of those will be the people that are going to come out of this. I would imagine. And there's Tom Emmer and there's Tom Cole, both of whom are part of leadership there. And eventually, they're going to turn to somebody who's elder statesman enough that they can just get a speaker in there.
Prediction from both of you, maybe, how long this will go on? How long will the GOP exist in the House without a speaker? Michael, your prediction.
My prediction is that a week from today they'll have a speaker.
Jim?
Well, I think it'll be right up to the time when they have to do it, when the government again gets ready to shut down, whatever that date is.
That's a month. I mean, that's a long time. I think they're getting pressure to be there to do something about Israel and to appropriate. They don't want to lose that issue, and their infighting is costing them on that. I do think that it would be sooner than the budget stuff, sooner than the domestic stuff.
Well, the reason why I say the budget is because it seems to me that the budget is the only thing with a firm deadline.
True, that's true.
Ukraine can be pushed down the road, and that's what they will continue to do as long as they can. So that's why I think the budget is the outline.
Right. On some level, the love for America's support of Ukraine has now shifted and has ebbed a bit. But the importance of supporting Israel in this moment seems to have robust support, both sides of the aisle. I wonder if this is a long, awful conflict, which it will be, I think, what the stomach for continuing that support might be. Maybe I'm skipping way ahead in the movie, and maybe it's not important, but I think it's instructive to see what happened with Ukraine and now to look at Israel. There's the same imperative that America feels having seen the barbarism that Hamas was behind. And I think that's fueling a lot of this support. And I know it's not universal, but there's a lot of it. In Congress, it would seem, pretty solid. Jim?
Well, I think the relationship between the United States and Israel being our only strong ally in that part of the world, and perhaps the strongest ally we have in the world because of our demographics. We have a lot of Jews in this country, and they're never going to stand for us turning our back on Israel. And I think in general, the public sees the Israelis as the good guys in this. There is an argument that, and a strong argument that Israel, especially of late, has abused their power in Palestine, in Gaza. But overall, I don't think that support's going to waver myself. I think that you'll have some voices come out from the left. You already have a bit, but the level of atrocity that went on in Gaza and in Israel really prevents this from fading away, I think, in our minds. And our media is all over it, much more than they're all over Ukraine, even though Ukraine was big in the press. There is no room for this to fade in any foreseeable future that I see. It's unfortunate that we can't use this to find a path to some kind of peace, and that we have to escalate in such a fashion that more on both sides are going to die. This is not good. We're not really attacking the problem. The real problem is Iran, and instead we're attacking people who are innocent people in Gaza, the innocent people in Gaza, and that's really a problem.
Michael, your thoughts? I mean, I'm just a note on that. I mean, that this is
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I was
No,
just going to say a terrorist organization like Hamas that deliberately embeds itself around civilians. That's why even as there are calls for more than 1 million people to get out of northern Gaza, Hamas is saying, "Don't anybody go anywhere. We're staying here." I think there are a couple of reasons behind that, but one of them is certainly that civilians are kind of a part of the shielding of Hamas in many ways. So civilians being everywhere is a good thing as far as Hamas is concerned. But go ahead, Michael, please.
And Jim apparently hiring extras for his wife.
Don't make fun of my sick mother, Michael.
No, I was lovely to see her. I wish mine were here in the background. What Jim says is obviously true. You also Jewish Americans are 2.5 or less % of the U.S. population. It's that there are a lot of Republicans and a lot of Christians that have an interest that is even sometimes a little duplicitous in that area. And it's why the Republicans are so frustrated not to be able to speak about this and to legislate about this and to draw the line between the differing aid for Ukraine and Israel right now. What it does give them time to do inadvertently is see what Israel's response is. If it's too much for the world, then the Republicans and the Congress has not been a part of that. I think there's not going to be a great appetite for massive death anywhere, but certainly not in Gaza, knowing the circumstances and even knowing what provoked it this time. So it's a tricky political play right now. Israel is always going to be a winner in the U.S. Congress. There's no doubt about it. But it's but at a time when they're not, when they may be doing things that a lot of Americans find distasteful, and funding of which a lot of Americans may find distasteful, the Republicans and the House may be able to get a pass on that.
And where Israel is not always a winner is in the UN. among the other parts of the world. Israel has been sanctioned by the UN, and we've always vetoed it in the United States. So they do have to be careful. The key word in all this response, while it's justified, is surgical. A mass killing of people in Gaza will not be accepted by most people in this country, I think, and around the world. And they have to be careful about that. That's why I continue to advocate. And, this is dangerous, I realize. But I think Russia is busy. I think China will turn its back. And I think this is the opportunity for Israel, backed by the United States, to take some kind of surgical action against the real problem, which is Iran. I've spoken to, I live in Beverly Hills, and Beverly Hills is known as Tehran of the West. And these are people who have escaped Iran. And they really believe that if there is some kind of push to get it started, that the people of Iran are tired of this theocracy government there and will in fact revolt. Now, is that dangerous as all heck? Yeah, it is, because we tried the same thing in Baghdad and in Afghanistan, and we see what happens.
Well, the same thing was done in Iran. I mean, when the Shah left, that's how you ended up with a theocracy.
Well, but he certainly abused his power. There has to be somebody they choose, not that the CIA chooses. That was the biggest problem.
One day Iranians who are living in America in Beverly Hills will be right about this, but they've said this very often at different times over the last 15 to 20 years. So might it happen this time? Well, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, is in Israel now. He's being very careful on Iran. He's saying, that right now they're holding back the $6 billion for the hostage deal that was made. It's not money that was Iranian money or American money that taxpayers paid for. And Iran, they see no fingerprints or no knowledge about what happened in Hamas, but they say the jury is still out on that. So they're being careful about that because they don't want to provoke another conflict there.
Yeah,
they're being careful for good reason, and they're being quiet for good reason. If they decide to do this, it's going to be decided in a very quiet way between the United States and Israel, and it should be, in my opinion, it should be a surgical attacks on their nuclear capabilities, take them out, and if they know where their leaders are, take them out. But not a mass invasion. This could be done with the weapons that the United States and Israel has. The danger, of course, is what will Russia say? What will China say? I contend that right now Russia's too busy in Ukraine, and their military is so stretched that this would be the opportunity.
It's such an audacious move, honestly. I know it's been preceded by an audacious move once before when Israel took out a nuclear plant, but I just wonder if that's not really even a surgical, as you described, kind of a surgical strike wouldn't just widen this conflict immensely. But obviously, there's now shelling going on in Lebanon. You get, Hezbollah is going to become involved. It's really an area that's teetering, and now
but it's all Iranian backed, and you got to, if you're going to strike
right.
the monster, strike at the head, and this. Anyway, look, I concede all the objections that are put up. I understand. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm saying it's something that should be considered, and this slow response of taking on Hezbollah at one point and taking on Hamas at another point, that is much more difficult on the ground in Gaza than it is to use our superiority in weapons against a place like Iran.
As we finish up, guys, I want to ask you about the presidential race and just how you square things these days. Week to week, we've been looking at it. I know it's still probably a bit early. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has entered the race. You've both talked about how independents can influence an election. Our pal Cenk has declared. I think he's trying more than anything to get Biden not to run. And I wonder if you can just speak to sort of the state of the state. And Nikki Haley is rising in the polls. What do you think, Michael? Give us an assessment.
I think none of the three people you mentioned just now matter to the race. I think that the president will run until he decides not to run. But every day that he is running, it's more likely that he is going to. He's also busy presidenting right now and arguably doing a good job as judged by the people who do that judging in terms of making sure that America is immersed in this conflict in a way that is diplomatic and solution based, and criticizing where they need to and not when they don't. So it gives the president a chance to do that. And then Trump is still the de facto leader. How well Nikki Haley is doing has no impact on the presidential race. I don't think she would be his choice for a vice presidential nominee, and I don't know if her appeal is just because she's running with 8 people who don't have a lot of appeal. I don't know. It's a race that is led by the 2 people that are leading it. I think RFK Jr., and this is more than anecdotal, but still I would say anecdotal. When I'm on the road talking to Republicans, they all say that they find him palatable, which is not, does not help Donald Trump. So if he peels votes away, I'd have to think that he's peeling more votes away from Trump voters. I think that there may be a chance that he would peel black voters away from Democrats, though.
And don't you think young demographic sparks to RFK Jr., Michael?
No, I don't.
Not particularly? No? Okay.
Not particularly. I don't think any demographic sparks to him, really. I think that it's a disaffected demographic, people who don't like either of their choices or feel that may like Biden but feel he's too old, or may even like Trump's policies but don't want to get bogged down in Trump himself. Those are the kind of people that would fall toward an independent candidate and have in the past. I don't know that there's enough of them. And I do think on balance it would hurt Trump more than it would hurt Biden, but I don't think it would be marked in either way.
The only reason I mention, and Jim, I want to hear what you say, is because I think the thing that he does effectively is rail against the military-industrial complex, big oil, big pharma. He says, Democrats are in the pocket of big pharma, Republicans are in the pocket of big oil. These are the kinds of things that sometimes land with a younger demographic. That's why I asked. Jim, tell me, please, your assessment of things now.
Well, I don't think RFK is a danger to the Democrats. It's marginal. I think, as I agree with Michael, that it's the crazies, it's the people who believe COVID was a hoax, and those folks who are mostly come from the right side of the ledger. So I don't think I think he's more of a problem for Trump than he is for Biden. The only thing that's going to hurt Biden is if some mainstream Democrat decides they were in a meeting where he didn't do well, where Biden didn't do well. That's not happened. Every Democrat who's been in meetings with Biden say that he is sharp, understands the issues, is well studied. And look, I believe that he should step aside, and we've had that conversation before. But when you compare him to the deranged comments that you're getting out of Donald Trump, there's no comparison. Trump can't remember who he ran against. He keeps saying he ran against Obama, and he gets things wrong all the time. So, whereas, that's not the problem. Now, I think Nikki Haley is a factor, because I believe as we go along, and Trump has more and more legal issues, eventually there's going to be a tipping point. Let me just say, there may be a tipping point where enough Republicans say he's not going to win, and they're going to have to turn to somebody else. The least scary of those remaining is Nikki Haley. And she does appeal to the independents who will decide this election. If I was a Democrat, the only Republican I'd be worried about at this point is Nikki Haley. She comes off, I don't agree with hardly any of her policies, but she comes off as less scary. She is more reasonable sounding on abortion, more reasonable sounding on supporting Israel. She makes the others look like rookies, especially Vivek. DeSantis is just totally disassembled. And they're really, Chris Christie's never going to get the Republican vote because of his effort to take down Trump. So And if she wins the Republican primary, or if there's some kind of brokered convention in the summer because Trump has been so damaged by his legal problems, then she becomes a factor, and I think she is a real danger to the Democrats.
Oh.
Yeah, I just want to add to that if Trump is not a factor or is unable to run or falters or anything, and I've maintained that for a while, that none of these 8 people will be president, that someone else will come in and run. The convention will do that, or it'll happen before the primaries, and a governor is going to run and do better than these 8.
It's pretty astounding. I think it's a comment on right-wing media, or the power of media generally, or the fractured nature of media, or the siloed nature, however you want to put it, that Trump can be as rhetorically reckless as he is, completely unhinged with just, when he goes off script, just riffing about the fact that he thinks Obama is actually pulling the strings on Biden. That's his latest thing. As you say, that he can't really keep anything straight. And yet, his movement in the polls is, as you said before, Jim, it's unshakable, the support, Again,
well,
I don't know.
He's getting some, in New Hampshire, there is some movement. It's not enough that he's going to lose. He's still ahead by 30 to 40 points. But I think, maybe I'm just too optimistic in these days, but I do think that these continued revelations of what he has done criminally and what he's done civilly with his company won't get to the 30% that Michael goes out and talks to on the road. But to the others, it might. And there are some Republicans who are very concerned about their own party. I mean, this election, if Trump wins the primary and goes on to the election and is massively defeated, which is possible, that election could really not just hurt Donald Trump, but the Republican Party in general. They'll lose the Senate, they'll lose the House, and they may lose elections in the foreseeable future.
Is George Santos going to be removed, Michael?
I would suspect he is. I think they're being careful because he doesn't really have anyone. I think some of these members of the Republican House, obviously nothing can happen because there's no speaker now, but none of these members of the Republican House want to see it happen necessarily because they might want to get his vote in this election. But I think he's done. And I think that, Steve Scalise doesn't even return his calls. And Santos said, I'm never going to vote for him because he won't reach out to me. Well, they're distancing themselves from him. Bob Menendez in the Senate has an additional indictment added. So at the end of next week, I think he's going to be brought before the courts. There are people on Capitol Hill who are in trouble. George Santos definitely one of them.
Guys, thank you. We've been on the air a year, and we went from KGO to this platform, and you guys have been here every Friday that you've been humanly able to make it. And I want you to know how grateful we all, and if you read the chats, you can see how everybody really appreciates your takes every week. Thank you very much.
It'd be nice if Jim showed up for the party.
Yeah, I know.
Jim Avila Michael Shure, everybody. Thanks, guys.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.